Yeah, you know what's interesting is you become an expert often in this place called the waiting. And it's not an expert you want to be, right? I mean, I think all of us want that instant gratification, the instant breakthrough. And at moments maybe you have that, but I think a lot of our discipleship and our walk with Jesus comes in those places of waiting that come in the tension. And I'll even go as far to call it the place of mystery, because I think the waiting place often has a lot of contradiction. It can even feel like suffering at times, and it can even feel very painful, but it's so necessary in order for the depth in our place of trust and surrender. You know, it's interesting because just coming off Easter, you know, we're in that beautiful picture of that tension of the crucifixion of Jesus on Friday, but the resurrection on Sunday. And I think we can all relate. A lot of us feel like we're living in the Saturday. The Saturday is you get the prophetic word, you have the encounter with God, you have the promise of God, and you find yourself in this place of going, I didn't think my life was going to look like this. You're post-divorce, you're post, losing that relationship or losing that job or not getting that opportunity at the church that you thought was definitely yours. You had all the prophetic words. Everything seemed like it was lining up. You thought this was some time where your voice was going to be that catalytic time where that prophetic voice of yours was going to be finally heard to the nations because you have felt that within you. And you're not wrong on any of it. But there is a thing called the timing of God, and timing comes with waiting. And so here you are often where you're living in the contradiction, which is that Friday moment. And then you live in the Saturday, and the Saturday is that place of going, I don't even know what now looks like. And then you have to find that place of trusting God in the middle of that. And my goodness, I feel like, Julian, parts of my story for sure. I feel like a lot of my life and even my prophetic journey and the promises of God in my life have been a Saturday experience. Yeah. Where I didn't expect to be where I was at. So I was single for 20 years and I was following the call of God in my life. I was pastoring a pastor for 13 years before I married Sean. And I was this woman of God that was going after the things of God and preaching and ministering, but I had a longing and a desire to be married. And yet God had me wait. And at 19 years old, he asked me a question, at 35 years old, because at 19, I laid it down and I gave it to him. And then years pass by, it's not happening. I'm like, okay, it's got to happen at some point, right? Because I know the promise of God. And at 35, he asked me the question, which changed everything for me. And this is kind of that Saturday moment. And that is, if you never get married, am I enough? If you never get the answer to the prayer. And I think that's it's painful, but it's a necessary question, that if you never get that breakthrough, is God still good? Is he still enough? Is he still the source? Will you still love extravagantly? Will you still prophesy generously? Will you still give of yourself fully? Will you still worship, unabandonedly? Will you still love him and live from a place that he's still good, even if you don't get the answer to the prayer? And there's the roots of our discipleship and our walk with Jesus. That's so essential. So at 35, I wrestled for a couple of days, Julian, because I wanted to be honest with God, and I knew God knew my heart. And I came back to him and I said something that might surprise some of the listeners. And that is, and this is in my book, but it's like, I said to God, you're not enough, but you need to become enough. Because if you're not enough, nothing will be enough. Marriage won't be enough. No breakthrough will be enough. No answered prayer will be enough. Because if Jesus doesn't satisfy me, and someone has to hear this, in your Saturday life, in your Friday life, in your Sunday life, he has to be enough. Like, he has to be enough in that waiting, in that place of tension, in the place of mystery. And then God did bring Sean. But it wasn't until I came to this place where God was enough. And then he taught me what it was to be content in my singleness, but still content for the promises of God. And being content doesn't mean you're giving up. It doesn't mean you're not saying, I don't believe. Being content is, no matter what, I'm still all in. No matter what, I still worship you. No matter what, you're still good. And the thing is, the waiting hasn't stopped. The Saturday, it doesn't stop. I think sometimes, or at least I did, I'll speak from my perspective, I really thought, probably very naively, that when I served God and I did everything right, everything was just going to turn out perfectly. And truth is, that's just not reality. And that's not a Debbie Downer. That's not a glass half empty. perspective. It's not a pessimistic perspective. I'm actually an incredibly optimistic person naturally, but it is a reality of finding peace in the storm, finding joy in the suffering, finding, do you know what I mean? So I've probably talked long enough on that.
No, I just love it. I think one of the things that I love, just a little throwaway comment that you were making about worshiping while you wait, like in the midst, that Saturday, the darkness that encapsulates the loneliness, the sense of abandonment that happens on Easter Saturday is where I think there's such a profound lesson in that even in the darkness, there is life to be found, there is joy to be found, there is a holy mystery, and that worship prepares the way for that in many senses.